May 21st. Almost a week had passed, and I still have not made the acquaintance of the Ligovskoys. I am waiting for a convenient occasion. Grushnitsky, like a shadow, follows the young princess everywhere. Their conversations are endless. When will he begin to bore her at last? Her mother does not pay any attention to this because he is not an eligible young man. That's the logic of mothers for you. I have observed 2 or 3 tender glances. An end must be put to it. Yesterday, Vera appeared for the first time at the well. Since our meeting in the grotto, she has not been out of the house. We dipped our glasses simultaneously, and bending, she said to me in a whisper, "You don't want to get acquainted with the Ligovskoys? It's the only place where we could see each other." A reproach. How dull, but I have deserved it. Apropos, tomorrow there is a subscription dance in the ballroom of the restaurant, and I am going to dance the mazurka with the young princess. May 22nd. The restaurant's ballroom was transformed into that of the Club of the Nobility. By 9 o'clock, everybody had arrived. The old princess and her daughter were among the last to appear. Many ladies looked at her with envy and ill will because Princess Mary dresses with taste. Those ladies who regard themselves as the aristocrats of the place concealed their envy and attached themselves to her. What can you do? Where there is feminine society, there will appear at once a higher and lower circle. Outside the window, in a crowd of people, stood Grushnitsky, pressing his face to the window pane and never taking his eyes off his goddess. As she passed by, she gave him a hardly perceptible nod. He beamed like the sun. The dancing began with a polonaise. Then the band began to play a waltz. Spurs tinkled, coattails flew up and whirled. I stood behind a stout lady. Her head was crowned with pink plumes. The luxuriance of her dress recalled the times of farthingales, and the variegation of her rough skin, the happy era of black taffeta patches. The largest wart on her neck was concealed by the clasp of a necklace. She was saying to her dancing partner, a captain of dragoons, "That young Princess Ligovskoy is an intolerable little thing. Fancy, she bumped into me and never apologized, but in addition turned around and looked at me through her lorgnette. C'est impayable. And what is she so proud of? She ought to be taught a lesson." "No trouble in getting that done," answered the obliging captain, and went into the next room. I immediately went up to the young princess and engaged her for the waltz, taking advantage of the easy local customs which allow one to dance with ladies to whom one has not been introduced. She could hardly force herself not to smile and not to hide her triumph. She managed, however, rather soon to assume a completely indifferent and even severe air. She nonchalantly dropped her hand on my shoulder, slightly inclined her pretty head to one side, and off we went. I do not know a waist more voluptuous and supple. Her fresh breath touched my face. Sometimes a curl that had become separated in the whirl of the waltz from its fellows would brush my burning cheek. I made 3 turns. She waltzes amazingly well. She was out of breath. Her eyes were dim. Her half-opened lips could hardly murmur the obligatory "Merci, monsieur." After several moments of silence, I said to her, assuming a most submissive air, "I hear, princess, that despite my being completely unknown to you, I have already had the misfortune to earn your displeasure. That you found me insolent. Can this be true?" "And now you would like to confirm me in this opinion?" she replied with an ironic little grimace, which incidentally was very becoming to her mobile features. "If I had the insolence to offend you in any way, then allow me to have the still greater insolence to beg your pardon, and truly I would wish very much to prove to you that you are mistaken about me." "You will find this very difficult." "Why so?" "Because you do not come to our house, and these balls will probably not take place very often." This means, I thought, that their doors closed to me forever. "Do you know, princess," I said with some vexation, "one should never turn down a repentant criminal. Out of sheer despair, he may become twice as criminal as before." And then laughter and whispering among the people around us made me turn and interrupt my sentence. A few steps away from me stood a group of men, and among them was the captain of dragoons who had declared hostile intentions against the charming young princess. He was particularly satisfied with something. He rubbed his hands, he laughed and exchanged winks with his companions. Suddenly out of their midst emerged a person in a dress coat with a long mustache and a florid face, and directed his unsteady steps straight toward the young princess. He was drunk. Having come to a stop in front of the disconcerted princess and clasping his hands behind his back, he fixed her with his bleary gray eyes and uttered in a hoarse, treble voice, "Permettez, Oh, what's the use of that? I simply engage you for the mazurka. What do you want? She uttered in a trembling voice as she cast around her an imploring glance. Alas, her mother was far away, and in her vicinity she could see none of the gentlemen she knew. One adjutant, I think, witnessed it all, but hid behind the crowd so as not to be involved in a row. Well, said the drunk, winking at the captain of dragoons who was encouraging him with signs. Don't you want to? Here I am again requesting the honor of engaging you. Pour mazurk. You think perhaps that I am drunk? That does not matter. One is much freer that way, I can assure you. I saw that she was about to swoon from fear and indignation. I went up to the drunk, took him rather firmly by the arm, and looking steadily into his eyes, asked him to go away because I added the princess had long ago promised to dance the mazurka with me. Well, nothing to be done, some other time, he said with a laugh, and went off to join his abashed companions, who immediately led him away into the other room. I was rewarded by a deep, wonderful glance. The princess went up to her mother and told her everything. The latter sought me out in the crowd and thanked me. She informed me that she used to know my mother and was on friendly terms with half a dozen of my aunts. I do not know how it happened that we have not met before now, she added, but you must admit that you alone are to blame for this. You shun everybody. I have never seen anything like it. I hope that the atmosphere of my drawing room will dissipate your spleen. Am I right? It will dissipate your spleen. I hope that the atmosphere of my drawing room will dissipate your spleen. Am I right? I said to her one of those phrases which everyone should have in store for such occasions. The quadrilles dragged on for a terribly long time. At last the mazurka resounded from the upper balcony. The young princess and I seated ourselves. Never once did I allude either to the tipsy man or to my former behavior or to Grushnitsky. The impression that the unpleasant scene had made upon her gradually dissipated. Her pretty face bloomed. She joked very charmingly. Her conversation was very witty, without any pretension to it. It was lively and free. Her observations were sometimes profound. I gave her to understand by means of a very involved sentence that I had long been attracted to her. She inclined her young head and colored slightly. You're a bizarre person, she presently said, raising upon me her velvety eyes and laughing in a constrained way. I did not wish to make your acquaintance, I continued, because you were surrounded by too dense a crowd of admirers, and I was afraid of getting completely lost in it. Your fears were unfounded. All of them are most dull. All? Are you sure you mean all? She looked at me intently as if trying to recall something. Then she slightly blushed again and finally uttered resolutely, all, including even my friend Grushnitsky? Why, is he your friend? She said, revealing some doubt. Yes. He does not enter, of course, into the category of dull people. Rather the category of unfortunate ones, I said, laughing. Of course, you find it funny? I wish you were in his place. Well, I used to be a cadet myself, and indeed it was the very best time of my life. But is he a cadet? She said quickly, and then added, I thought that... What is it that you thought? Nothing. Who is that lady? Here the conversation took another direction and did not return to that subject anymore. The mazurka came to an end, and we parted until our next meeting. The ladies left. I went to have supper and ran into Werner. Aha, he said. So that's the way you are. Didn't you intend not to make the princess's acquaintance in any other way than by saving her from certain death? I did better, I answered him. I saved her from fainting at a ball. How's that? Tell me. No, try and guess, you who can guess all things in the world. May 23rd. Around 7 tonight, I was out strolling on the boulevard. Grushnitsky, on seeing me in the distance, came up to me. A kind of absurd exultation shone in his eyes. He gripped my hand and said in a tragic voice, I thank you, Pechorin. You understand me? No, but whatever it is not worth gratitude, I answered, having indeed no charitable action on my conscience. But what about last night? You can't have forgotten. Mary told me everything. Do you two have everything in common now, even gratitude? Look, said Grushnitsky very importantly, Please do not make fun of my love. If you wish to remain my pal, you see, I love her to distraction, and I hope that she loves me too. I have a favor to ask of you. You are going to visit them tonight. Promise me to observe everything. I know you are experienced in these matters. You know women better than I do. Women. Who will understand them? Their smiles contradict their glances. Their words promise and lure, while the sound of their voices drives us away. One minute they comprehend and divine our most secret thought, and the next they do not understand the clearest hints. Take the young princess, for instance. Yesterday her eyes blazed with passion when they rested upon me. Today they are dull and cold. This perhaps is due to the effect of the waters, I answered. You see in everything the nasty side, you materialist. He added contemptuously. Let us switch, however, to another matter. And pleased with this poor pun, he cheered up. Around 8:30, we went together to the princess's house. Walking past Vera's windows, I saw her at the window. We threw each other a fleeting glance. She entered the Ligovskoys' drawing room soon after us. The old princess introduced me to her as to a relation of hers. Tea was being served. There were many visitors. The conversation was general. I endeavored to ingratiate myself with the old princess. I jested. I made her laugh heartily several times. The young princess also wanted to laugh more than once, but she restrained herself so as not to depart from the role she had assumed. She finds that a languorous air suits her, and perhaps she does not err. Grushnitsky was apparently very glad that my gaiety did not infect her. After tea, we all went into the music room. Are you pleased with my obedience, Vera? I said as I passed her. She threw me a glance full of love and gratitude. I am now used to those glances, but there was a time when they made my bliss. The old princess had her daughter sit down at the piano. Everyone was asking her to sing something. I kept silent, and taking advantage of the hubbub, I drew away toward a window with Vera, who wanted to tell me something very important for both of us. It turned out to be nonsense. Meanwhile, my indifference was annoying to the young princess, as I could conjecture by a single angry, blazing glance. Oh, I understand wonderfully that kind of conversation, mute but expressive, brief but forcible. She started to sing. Her voice is not bad, but she sings poorly. I did not listen, however. In compensation, Grushnitsky, with his elbows on the piano facing her, devoured her with his eyes, and every minute kept saying under his breath, Charmante, délicieux. Listen, Vera was saying to me, I do not want you to meet my husband, but you must without fail please the old princess. It is easy for you. You can achieve anything you want. We shall see each other only here. Only here? She colored and went on. You know that I am your slave. I never was able to resist you, and for this I shall be punished. You will cease to love me. I wish at least to save my reputation. Not for my own sake, you know that very well. Oh, I beseech you, do not torment me as before with empty doubts and feigned coldness. I shall die soon, perhaps. I feel myself getting weaker every day, and in spite of that, I cannot think of a future life. I think only of you. You men do not understand the delights of a glance, of a handshake. While I swear to you, when listening to your voice, I experienced such deep, strange bliss that the most ardent kisses could not replace it. Woo! Meanwhile, Princess Mary had stopped singing. A murmur of praise sounded around her. I went up to her after all the other guests and said something to her about her voice rather casually. She made a grimace, protruding her lower lip, and curtsied in a very mocking manner. It is all the more flattering to me, she said, since you did not listen to me at all, but then perhaps you do not like music? On the contrary, particularly after dinner. Grushnitsky is right in saying that you have most prosaic tastes, and I see that you like music in a gastronomic way. This is what they call parlor talk or salon talk. You are wrong again. I am far from being a gourmet. My digestion is exceedingly bad. But music after dinner puts one to sleep, and sleep after dinner is good for one's health. Consequently, I like music from a medical point of view. In the evening, on the contrary, it irritates my nerves too much. My mood becomes either too melancholy or too gay. Both are exhausting when there is no positive cause to be sad or to be joyful. And moreover, melancholy at a social gathering is absurd, while immoderate gaiety is improper. She did not hear me out, moved away, sat down next to Grushnitsky, and there started between them some kind of sentimental conversation. The young princess, it seemed, replied rather absently and irrelevantly to his wise pronouncements. Though she tried to show that she listened to him with attention, for now and then he would glance at her with surprise, trying to guess the reason for the inward agitation that expressed itself now and then in her restless glance. But I have found you out, my dear princess. Beware. You want to repay me in my own coin, to prick my vanity. You will not succeed. And if you declare war on me, I shall be merciless. In the course of the evening, I tried several times on purpose to join their conversation, but she countered my remarks rather dryly. And with feigned annoyance, I finally moved away. The young princess triumphed. Grushnitsky likewise. Have your triumph, my friends. Hurry, you won't triumph long. What is to be done? I have a presentiment. Whenever I become acquainted with a woman, I always guess, without fail, whether she will fall in love with me or not. I spent the rest of the evening at Vera's side and talked of old times to my heart's content. What does she love me for so much? I really don't know, particularly since she's the only woman who has completely understood me with all my petty weaknesses and wicked passions. Can evil possibly be so attractive? Grushnitsky and I left together. When we got outside, he put his arm through mine and said after a long silence, "Well, what do you think?" "That you're a fool," I wanted to answer, but restrained myself and merely shrugged my shoulders. May 29th. During all these days, I never once departed from my system. The young princess begins to like my conversation. I told her some of the strange occurrences in my life, and she begins to see in me an extraordinary person. I laugh at everything in the world, especially at feelings. This is beginning to frighten her. In my presence, she does not dare to launch upon sentimental debates with Grushnitsky, and has several times already replied to his sallies with a mocking smile. But every time that Grushnitsky comes up to her, I assume a humble air and leave them alone together. The first time she was glad of it or tried to make it seem so. The second time she became cross with me. The third time she became cross with Grushnitsky. "You have very little vanity," she said to me yesterday. "Why do you think that I have more fun with Grushnitsky?" I answered that I was sacrificing to a pal's happiness my own pleasure. "And mine," she added. I looked at her intently and assumed a serious air. After this, I did not say another word to her all day. In the evening, she was pensive. This morning at the well, she was more pensive still. When I went up to her, she was absently listening to Grushnitsky, who, it seems, was being rhapsodical about nature. But as soon as she saw me, she began to laugh, very mal apropos, pretending not to notice me. I walked off some distance and stealthily watched her. She turned away from her interlocutor and yawned twice. Decidedly, Grushnitsky has begun to bore her. I shall not speak to her for 2 more days. June 3rd. I often wonder why I do so stubbornly try to gain the love of a little maiden whom I do not wish to seduce and whom I shall never marry. Why this feminine coquetry? Vera loves me more than Princess Mary will ever love anyone. If she had seemed to me to be an unconquerable belle, then perhaps I might have been fascinated by the difficulty of the enterprise. But it is nothing of the sort. Consequently, this is not that restless need for love that torments us in the first years of youth and drives us from one woman to another, until we find one cannot abide us, and here begins our constancy, that true infinite passion which can be mathematically expressed by means of a line falling from a given point into space. The secret of that infinity lies solely in the impossibility of reaching a goal, that is to say, reaching the end. Why then do I take all this trouble? Because I envy Grushnitsky? Poor thing, he has not earned it at all. Or is it the outcome of that nasty but unconquerable feeling which urges us to destroy the sweet delusions of a fellow man, in order to have the petty satisfaction of saying to him when he asks in despair, what is it he should believe? My friend, the same thing happened to me, and still, you see, I dine, I sup, I sleep in perfect peace, and hope to be able to die without cries and tears. And then again, there is boundless delight in the possession of a young, barely unfolded soul. It is like a flower whose best fragrance emanates to meet the very first ray of the sun. It should be plucked that very minute, and after inhaling one's fill of it, one should throw it away on the road. Perchance someone will pick it up. I feel in myself this insatiable avidity, which engulfs everything met on the way. I look upon the sufferings and joys of others only in relation to myself, as on the food sustaining the strength of my soul. I am no longer capable myself of frenzy under the influence of passion. Ambition with me has been suppressed by circumstances, but it has manifested itself in other forms, since ambition is nothing else than thirst for power. And my main pleasure, which is to subjugate to my will all that surrounds me and to excite the emotions of love, devotion, and fear in relation to me, is it not the main sign and greatest triumph of power? To be to somebody the cause of sufferings and joys without having any positive right to it. Is this not the sweetest possible nourishment for our pride? And what is happiness? Sated pride. If I considered myself to be better and more powerful than anyone in the world, I would be happy. If everybody loved me, I would find in myself infinite sources of love. Evil begets evil. The first ache gives us an idea of the pleasure of tormenting another. The idea of evil cannot enter a person's head without his wanting to apply it to reality. Ideas are organic creations. Someone has said that their very birth endows them with a form, and this form is action. He in whose head more ideas have been born is more active than others. This is why a genius chained to an office desk must die or go mad. Exactly as a powerfully built man whose life is sedentary and whose behavior is virtuous dies of apoplexy. The passions are nothing else but ideas in their first phase of development. They are an attribute of the youth of the heart, and he is a fool who thinks he will be agitated by them all his life. Many a calm river begins as a turbulent waterfall, yet none hurtles and foams all the way to the sea. But that calm is often the sign of great, though concealed, strength. The plenitude and depth of feelings and thoughts does not tolerate frantic surgings. The soul, while experiencing pain or pleasure, gives itself a strict account of everything and becomes convinced that so it must be. It knows that without storms, the constantly torrid sun will wither it. It becomes penetrated with its own life. It fondles and punishes itself as if it were a beloved child. Only in this supreme state of self-knowledge can a man evaluate divine justice. Woo! What a fucking passage. On rereading this page, I notice that I have strayed far from my subject, but what does it matter? I write this journal for myself, and consequently anything that I may toss into it will become in time for me a precious memory. Grushnitsky came and threw himself on my neck. He had been promoted to an officer's rank. We had some champagne. Dr. Werner dropped in soon after him. "I do not congratulate you," he said to Grushnitsky. "Why?" "Because a soldier's coat is very becoming to you, and you must admit that an infantry army officer's uniform made in this watering place will not give you any glamour. You see, up to now you were an exception, while now you will come under the general rule." Talk on, doctor. You will not prevent me from being delighted." "He does not know," added Grushnitsky, whispering into my ear, "what hopes these epaulets give me. Ah, epaulets, epaulets. Your little stars are guiding stars. No, I'm entirely happy now." "Are you coming with us for that walk to the hollow?" I asked him. "I? For nothing in the world shall I show myself to the young princess till my uniform is ready." "Do you wish me to announce the glad news to her?" "No, please do not tell her. I want to surprise her. By the way, tell me, how are you getting on with her?" He lost countenance and grew pensive. He wanted to boast and lie, but he was ashamed to do so, and yet it would have been mortifying to admit the truth. "What do you think? Does she love you?" "Love me? Come, Pechorin. What notions you do have. How could this happen so fast, even if she does love one? A decent woman would not tell. Fine, and probably, according to you, a decent man should also keep silent about his passion? Ah, my good fellow, there is a way of doing things. There is much that is not said, but guessed. That's true, however, the love that is read in the eyes does not bind a woman to anything. Whereas words, take care, Grushnitsky, she is fooling you. She, he answered, raising his eyes to heaven and smiling complacently. I pity you, Pechorin. He left. In the evening, a numerous party set out on foot for the hollow. In the opinion of local scientists, that hollow is nothing else than an extinguished crater. It is situated on a slope of Mount Mashuk, less than a mile from town. To it leads a narrow trail among bushes and cliffs. As we went up the mountain, I offered the young princess my arm, and she never abandoned it during the entire walk. Our conversation began with gossip. I passed in review of our acquaintances, both present and absent. First I brought out their comic traits and then their evil ones. My bile began to stir. I started in jest and finished in frank waspishness. At first it amused her, then frightened her. You are a dangerous man, she said to me. I would sooner find myself in a wood under a murderer's knife than be the victim of your sharp tongue. I ask you seriously, when it occurs to you to talk badly about me, better take a knife and cut my throat. I don't think you will find it very difficult. Do I look like a murderer? You are worse. I thought a moment and then said, assuming a deeply touched air, yes, such was my lot since my very childhood. Everybody read in my face the signs of bad inclinations which were not there. But they were supposed to be there, and so they came into existence. I was modest. They accused me of being crafty. I became secretive. I felt deeply good and evil. Nobody caressed me. Everybody offended me. I became rancorous. I was gloomy. Other children were merry and talkative. I felt myself superior to them, but was considered inferior. I became envious. I was ready to love the whole world. None understood me, and I learned to hate. My colorless youth was spent in a struggle with myself and with the world. Fearing mockery, I buried my best feelings at the bottom of my heart, where they died. I spoke the truth. I was not believed. I began to deceive. When I got to know well the fashionable world and the mechanism of society, I became skilled in the science of life and saw how others were happy without that skill, enjoying at no cost to themselves all those advantages which I so indefatigably pursued. And then in my breast despair was born, not that despair which is cured with the pistol's muzzle, but cold, helpless despair concealed under amiability and a good-natured smile. I became a moral cripple. One half of my soul did not exist. It had withered away. It had evaporated. It had died. I cut it off and threw it away while the other half stirred and lived, at the service of everybody. And this nobody noticed, because nobody knew that its dead half had ever existed. But now you have aroused its memory in me, and I have read to you its epitaph. To many people, all epitaphs in general seem ridiculous, but not so to me, especially when I recall what lies beneath them. However, I do not ask you to share my views. If my outburst seems to you ridiculous, please laugh. I warn you that it will not distress me in any way. At that moment I met her eyes. Tears danced in them. Her arm, leaning on mine, trembled. Her cheeks glowed. She was sorry for me. Compassion, an emotion to which all women so easily submit, had sunk its claws into her inexperienced heart. During the whole walk she was absent-minded, did not coquette with anyone, and that is a great sign. We reached the hollow. The ladies left their escorts, but she did not abandon my arm. The witticisms of the local dandies did not amuse her. The steepness of the precipice near which she stood did not frighten her, while the other young ladies squealed and closed their eyes. On the way back I did not renew our melancholy conversation, but to my trivial questions and jokes she replied briefly and absently. On the way back, I did not renew our melancholy conversation, but to my trivial questions and jokes she replied briefly and absently. "Have you ever loved?" I asked her at last. She glanced at me intently, shook her head, and again became lost in thought. It was evident that she wanted to say something, but she did not know how to begin. Her breast heaved. "What would you?" A muslin sleeve as little protection, and an electric spark ran from my wrist to hers. "Almost all passions start thus. And we often deceive ourselves greatly in thinking that a woman loves us for our physical or moral qualities. Of course, they prepare and incline their hearts for the reception of the sacred fire. Nonetheless, it is the first contact that decides the matter. "Don't you think I was very amiable today?" said the young princess to me with a forced smile when we returned from the excursion. We parted. "She is displeased with herself. She accuses herself of having treated me coldly. Oh, this is the main triumph. Tomorrow she will want to recompense me. I know it all by heart. That is what is so boring." June 4th. Today I saw Vera. She has exhausted me with her jealousy. The young princess, it seems, took it into her head to confide the secrets of the heart to Vera. Not a very fortunate choice, one must admit. I can guess to what it all tends, Vera kept saying to me. "Better tell me now plainly that you love her." "But if I don't, then why pursue her, disturb her, excite her imagination?" "Oh, I know you well. Listen, if you want me to believe you, then come next week to Kislovodsk. We are going there after tomorrow. The Ligovskoys remain here for a little while longer. Rent an apartment nearby. We shall be living in the big house near the spring. On the mezzanine floor. Princess Ligovskoy will be on the first floor. And next door there is a house belonging to the same proprietor, which is not yet occupied. Will you come?" I'm laughing because in the margin, whoever owned this book before me wrote the word sex with a big exclamation point. "And next door there is a house belonging to the same proprietor, which is not yet occupied. Will you come?" I promised, and on the same day sent a messenger to rent those lodgings. Grushnitsky came to see me at 6 in the evening and announced that his uniform would be ready on the morrow, just in time for the ball. "At last I shall dance with her the whole evening. What a chance to talk," he added. "When is that ball?" "Why, tomorrow, didn't you know? A big festival, and the local authorities have undertaken to arrange it."